Have you ever seen a transfer case pulled in a sketchier way? Please leave a comment if you have. Hey everybody, what is going on and welcome back to another video. So I just grabbed a bunch of crap from the garage. I got the transmission jack, the electric guns, some gloves, an oil drain pan, just a bunch of stuff to hopefully get this transmission out today. Alright, I got fuel for myself, fuel for the Trans Am. What about 180? You are not an instant winner. You are also not a sponsor. Yeah, so I've been driving the Trans Am since the Tahoe's been down. And boy, do I want to friggin' LsxSwap this thing. I'm putting like 20 bucks of gas in it every 2 days. 3 days at the most. I'm probably not going, I mean the odometer's broken, but back and forth to work, I'm probably not doing even 50 miles on like 20 bucks. And that 20 bucks gets me around 6.8, 7 gallons. I don't know the exact math on that, but I think that's pretty terrible. All right, so I spent some time last night getting this thing up in the air. It's an absolute pain in the ass with the driveway. So literally it took me like 45 minutes to get this thing level enough where the jack stands weren't kind of pushing forward with the slope of the driveway and all the cracks. But anyway, I got it up, I got it level and safe, and we are now ready to crawl into here and start taking shit off. I think I'm going to start with the transfer case, as I mentioned earlier. There really isn't enough room under here to pull the whole thing together. You see the transmission starts right there by the oil pan and then comes all the way back to behind this Crossmember or brace here. So that's with the transfer case and everything attached. So I'm going to start by, I guess, taking the drive shaft off. I'll probably, well, I gotta take both drive shafts off anyway, so I'll take off the rear and front drive shafts. Then try to get in here and get to the transfer case bolts. If the exhaust is kind of in the way, I'll take the Y pipe down next. The thing is, the exhaust on these trucks, it's absolutely terrible. Once they get old and you get even the slightest amount of rust on those studs for the exhaust manifolds, even if you heat them up, most of the time they just friggin' snap off. I'm gonna try to heat them anyway and just take my time with getting it back on. Hopefully I could get them off without snapping any. But I think the biggest thing are gonna be these two back here, because these two little bastards always snap off. If you're stuck working in your driveway like a peasant, like I've been doing for the past I don't know how many years, Harbor Freight moving blankets can be your best friend. I guess it'll be smart while I have this drive shaft out to pop a new seal in this front diff. I'm also going to throw a rear main in it. I do have an extra one from the kit I bought for the Camaro for the rear cover. Wow, that came out suspiciously easy. Alright guys, so the camera was not recording, but what I just did was pull off the skid plate underneath the transfer case, and I was talking to myself for a good like 5 minutes explaining how it's good practice to put the bolts back in where you took them from, or bag them up and label them if you're doing a big job like this. I'm too lazy for that, so I'm just gonna stick them back where I got them. And then I just slipped the drive shaft out. I just had to pull this clamp off of here. There's just like this band clamp you'd find on a CV axle. So I just got in there with the snips, twisted that off, and then the drive shaft slips right out of here. And that is sitting right over there. Now at the back here, we're gonna pull the rear drive shaft. I'm just gonna mark this just so I put it back in the same spot to avoid any potential vibrations. But with both of these out is a good time to inspect the view joints, because if they're worn out, now would be the perfect time to replace them. And these are actually in really, really good shape. They're moving nice and smooth. There's no play in them. And these are the original U-joints with 220,000 miles on them. You can see they still have the plastic in there. These weren't replaced. If they were replaced, you'd see they'd have clips in here. But those are 100% still good. So I think the next thing I'm going to try to do is try to get this exhaust off. The studs look like they're in good condition, but I've had these look absolutely perfect, just light coat of rust, and still snap off. So I'm going to just disconnect the O2 sensors first, then come in with the little map gas torch, heat them up, gun them off. Hopefully they come off in one piece, and then we'll move on to the back flange. Now this one above the oxygen sensor is a tricky little shit. You're gonna wanna pull the sensor out because just the angle of it, you're gonna strip it. I tried just getting in there without removing it, but it's getting a little risky. There we are. Beautiful. All came out, no casualties. And now we got to pull, I think there's 2 more O2 sensors in this pipe. There's one here. I'm not sure if the other one is all the way back there behind the Y or on the other side of that curve. All right. And the last sensor was still in the Y here, so I already got that disconnected. These are the 2 I replaced, this one here and then that front left one that I removed that looked brand new. Those are the 2 that the heater circuits went out on. But last thing is trying to get these guys off. I really, I doubt these are gonna come off. They're most likely gonna snap. It's not too much of a big deal because you can just put a nut and bolt through here. The only thing is you have to get this stud that's kind of pressed in here out, and that could be a pain in the ass. But we're gonna heat them up, see if we can get them out without breaking them. Yep, she snapped. Same thing. All right, that's gonna be the most tedious part of this whole thing, is heating those up to make sure you don't break any. I mean, aside from the back too, you do not want to snap the ones on the manifolds because then you're gonna be changing the whole manifold out. But we should be able to drop this down now. I might have to remove the cross member for the transmission, but I think I might have enough room to swing this. It's just hitting the back by the floor because I can't get it down far enough to clear this. It's just hitting this hump in the frame. So I'm just gonna get a jack, support this, zip the transmission bolt out, zip the 4 support bolts out. We'll pull this thing down and this will come right out. It looks like these are also 15s. Now I'm basically doing this as I go. I've done a lot of rear-wheel drive transmissions like Savannahs, Express vans, obviously my Camaro, Trans Am, that was an automatic. I think this is only like maybe the second 4x4 I'm doing. So it's a learning experience for both of us, just trying to figure out what needs to come out before what. But those are out. Let me grab the jack and we'll get this cross member out of here. So I got the floor jack, but I think I'm just gonna go and put the transmission jack under it. After I get the transfer case up, get this cross member down, I'll get the transmission jack over there. That way we can pull the transfer case out. Ooh. That looks pleasant. Well, it's supposed to be the color transmission fluid. This thing was probably never changed. Let's see what this looks like, because you guys remember, link at the top of the screen, I pulled this pan and thoroughly cleaned it out, put a new filter, fresh fluid. Not bad. Smells absolutely fine. Like I said, I think the sun shield just broke, and you know, the clutch material and everything is probably all right. Regardless, we're going to rebuild the whole thing, but I'm definitely pretty curious to crack this thing open and see what the clutches and everything else looks like, considering the mileage. But while this is draining, I just want to take a second to thank you guys for over 30,000 subscribers. I was planning on kind of making a video on it when we hit 10,000, and then from there, I was just busy, and we shot up so quick from 10 to 30. We just soared right by 20, and we actually passed 30. I think we're at around 32, 3,300 right now. So thank you guys for that. I know you love this Tahoe stuff, and I will continue to bring these videos to you guys. For the Trans Am, once I get that AC video out, I'm hoping sometime maybe the end of this week, the weekend. After that, I'm going to just change the format up because it's taken too long to get those videos out. Just the voiceover editing and having to work on all these cars, it just takes so much time. And I want to enjoy that car, and the interior is such a mess, so I really want to try to get these videos shot out as quickly as possible. That should be fine. I'm not sure what size these are. It's like 21s, 22s. What's that? That is a 13/16, so looks like they're 21s. Yeah, all right, that'll work. Alright, the weight's pulling this thing down. I thought it would at least kind of wedge itself in there for a bit. Alright, I think we can get the exhaust out, get the weight off the K-member. There we go. Whew, that opens up a lot of space now. Also, try not to lose the O-rings for the exhaust. One side is kind of like a slip fit, kind of flared end on the pipe that actually goes to the manifold. And then the driver's side has this ring. I think the worst part of this whole job are the leaves going up my butt crack. And this side does have double nuts. So there's a nut that goes on there, tightens the cross member in, and that actually sits against this bracket for what I think is the flex fuel sensor, because there are fuel lines going to it. Not sure, it might be something for evap. Transmission mount looks alright. I might just leave that. Alright, I cleaned some stuff up. I'm under here with the jack now. One thing I'm not sure of, I might have to remove this cross member here right below the oil pan. Just because to get to the top bell housing bolts, if I want to drop this down to tip it, it looks like the pan is going to hit that cross member. So I'm just going to get the jack under it for now. The transmission jack. We'll remove the jack from the transfer case. I'll see if I get the transfer case out. Worst case, if I need to tip it, we'll just come in there and remove that K-member. Damn, this thing actually goes pretty high. I didn't think it was going to fit. That's max height. It like barely makes it. It just touches it. Once I drop the transfer case, the jack off the transfer case. It'll sit on it, but it barely makes it. Now I'm going to use the strap later on. Right now it's just resting on here just because there are like fuel lines and electrical connectors. I still have to get off the transmission. But now I think I have access to most of the bolts holding it to the transmission. First, I'm going to have to take off the connectors though. Alright, so I think I got all the connections off. There's a harness that's running from the transmission side, and then it kind of drapes over the top of the case. And there's a few of these like plastic hold downs tying it to the case. So I unclipped them, got the harness off. There are 2 sensors. I think they're speed sensors, one on each side towards the back. That's these little connectors here. There was like one on this side and then one all the way up here. Then there was the vent for the transmission secured through another one of those loops right at the top here. I pulled that out, and then I disconnected the transfer case vent from this little elbow up here. But with all that out of the way, I think that's everything. The cable for the transmission isn't connected to that. It's not tied down in any way. So with all that stuff off, it looks like we're pretty much free. All we gotta do is unbolt it from the transmission and slide it back. So next I'm gonna pull the transmission mount off so I can gain access to the 2 bolts behind it. I'm gonna try lowering the jack down to see if I can reach the top ones easier. And just like that, we are resting on the torsion bar Crossmember. So it looks like I'm just gonna have to kind of blind feel my way up there, because I'm not gonna be able to actually see what I'm doing. All right, my kryptonite here might be not having a wobbly universal socket. I just have one for the 1/2-inch drive, but I'm gonna try to get up here without it, and hopefully I can get this thing out. Just gonna have to feel around. All right, so I was able to get those top 2 ones out relatively easily. The one on the left, I had to just use this kind of Flex 15 because I didn't have a universal. Otherwise, I could have just zipped them out with a ratchet. But we have 6 of these bolts in all. There are 2 at the bottom, 2 in the middle on each side, and then 2 in the same kind of area, but at the top. The only thing I'm not 100% on is if I'm removing these right bolts, because this is going to separate the entire thing from the transmission, but I'm not sure if this is actually I think this is just part of the tail housing that attaches the transfer case to it. So when this comes out, the output shaft might extend too far where it's not going to let me to get this thing out. So I'm going to just pull these 2 here, see if I can wiggle this thing, if it's going to clear it, but I have a feeling I'm probably going to have to remove the bolts over here instead of these. I don't know, I might clear it. Let me bring the jack up a tiny bit. Oh yeah, we're out. See, the problem is, whoo, she's a pissin'. The tail shaft there, the output shaft is gonna probably keep me from getting this thing out. I'm gonna play with it a little bit, but if it's not gonna go, I'm just gonna remove the bolts that hold this kind of extension housing on here, and then I could just slide this over back to the transmission, and then I should be able to just slide the transfer case down. All right, I got them kind of split, but in an effort to kind of keep the this midsection attached to the transmission, I'm just going to run one bolt through it. That way I could pull on this and it's not going to keep you know, pulling that center section out. Here she comes. Have you ever seen a transfer case pulled in a sketchier way? Please leave a comment if you have. Next, I'm going to pull the starter so I can get to the torque converter bolts. We'll zip those out. I'm just going to let it dangle there. I think I could get to where I need to get. Alright guys, so my battery went dead, but you didn't miss much. I just came in here and I zipped the skid plates off. Those are all 15mm bolts, just so if I got to pull that cross member, at least I have them out of the way. Plus I'm going to come around the other side and attempt to zip the torque converter bolts out. But I got the starter dropped down, and the only other thing I did was remove the little plastic cover. This sits right up here behind the starter, between the starter and the bell housing. So there's one 10mm bolt right in that hole holding that in. You need to take this off because our torque converter bolts are right in this area. So with this cover off, you're probably not gonna be able to see them, but our torque converter bolts are right in here. And I have a wrench on the crankshaft. That's a 24mm. We're just gonna spin this over. As each bolt comes through here, I'm gonna zip them out one at a time. I believe there are 6, but I may be wrong. Alright, so I don't know how much of that I was actually recording, but I got the 3 torque converter bolts out. There are only 3. I thought there were 6, but I'm used to pulling for all 80s. Those have 6 bolts. So 3 torque converter bolts. The torque converter is loose. You can come in here to this little access hole and spin it now, so we're free from the flywheel. Next, I'm going to just try to remove any connections like the cooler lines. There are some clips holding fuel lines to the top of the case, the park gear select cable, plus any electrical connectors, stuff like that. And then it's just the bell housing bolts, and we should be out of here. All right, so our shift linkage here has a clip. Harbor Freight, but there's a clip going through here that I can remove with my hands, but the little Harbor Freight pick can't remove, and that's going to let the cable come out of this bracket. And then we have I think that's a 15. I have a 13 here, but yeah, that's a 15. There's a 15mm bolt there, but I'm going to leave that on because I could just pop this off of the ball like so. And then we have our connector for our neutral safety switch. And then it looks like there's a bracket up here holding some cables with an 8mm. I'm not sure if you guys can see that, but I'm going to pull this 8mm out of here, and that's actually holding the fuel lines too, so I can kind of leave these alone without disrupting these rusty lines. And then I think that's it. The vent is attached to that. I think this is just the transfer case vent. It's clipped up by the bell housing. So I'm gonna go pull this off, then we'll do the cooler hoses on the other side, and then I think that's it. We'll see if we can get to these bell housing bolts. Just gotta get the connector off the transmission. That's on the other side. So this is kind of like this oval shape. You want to squeeze on the kind of wider sides. Boy, please bring back memories. Now the key is to not lose it. I'm just flicking these out. I have extras, so I don't really care if the thing goes flying. Got it. Wow, they come out a lot easier when they're new. All right, those are disconnected. Nothing's really coming out of them, which is good. Oh, never mind. Forget everything I said. We're just gonna remove the bolts holding the actual transmission to the engine. They go all the way around this thing. I'm going to start at the top, and I think with enough extensions I could kind of sit up here and reach the top ones all the way back there. There's just no room, and I have no light. You guys aren't going to see what's going on. So I'm going to zip all these out, and I'll come back in with you when we're actually separating it and dropping it down. All right, there actually is enough room for me to just squeeze you guys in here to show you what I'm doing. We're getting to these bolts all the way back here. They're going all the way along the top, and then they come down the sides and all the way underneath. And most of these are 15s. Actually, all the bolts holding the transmission to the engine are 15s, but in some spots there are some brackets. Like at the top, there's another bracket that holds the fuel lines to the bell housing. The top nut is a 13. Once you get that out of the way, it's actually like a stud. So you see how these are kind of long and they're kind of like studs. The top nut is a 13. Once you get the bracket out of the way, the bottom one is going to be a 15 that's actually holding the transmission on. All right, guys, I got all the bell housing bolts out. There are actually 3 of those little nuts. There's one more bracket on the very top bolt that holds the case vent hoses to the top of the bell housing. So those 3 got off. I got all the bell housing bolts off. I had to make this friggin' janky thing just to get the top one out because I couldn't find my 3/8 wobble socket. I learned my lesson from last time. I have this thing strapped down. It definitely seems to work better with the automatic, and there's a lot more space to get that giant ass buckle on there. So now I'm just going to lift this up, get the weight off of the crossmember there, get the weight on the jack, and we're just gonna wiggle the hell out of it until it breaks free. I mean, this thing's been on here since 2004 most likely, 220,000 miles, so it might be a little stuck. Make sure I'm able to lift the whole friggin' engine. It's still stuck on here. Just getting in the starter hole. Oh, there we go. That was pretty easy. All right, let's drop the jack down a bit. Oh, yeah, we're loose. Just the dowel pins like to hold it. There goes the dipstick. And we'll just leave that there. Make sure nothing's holding it. I'll make sure like nothing here is still connected. I think we're free. That's it, we're out. But before I wheel this out of here, well, our rear main is definitely not leaking. That thing is bone dry, the cover, the top of the pan, everything. Someone commented that usually it's the cam sensor, or it might actually be the oil pressure sensor. You know, see, it's kind of wet right there at the top of the valley, and then it's probably just dripping down the side of the block. Man, it barely fits. All right, I had to get a little sketchy, I mean crafty, with some 2x4s to get the thing up high enough. But it is out. All right, so we're out. It's 1:46 now. I started around 10:30, so about 3.5 hours almost. Not too bad. Nothing really gave me a problem. I mean, as I mentioned when I got this thing, there really isn't much rust on it. After heating up the exhaust, Y pipe came right out. I'm still waiting on the rebuild kit to come, but next video I'm going to take this down to the garage, get it all set up on the table, and next video we'll start breaking it apart, see what's going on inside. But I am tired, I am sweaty, just absolutely soaked. I actually have to get going to work, so I'm going to run inside, take a shower. Be on the lookout for the next video, because we're going to be tearing this thing down probably in a few days, and we'll see what's going on inside with it. I'm really curious. I got 220,000 miles on it. Aside from the sun shell breaking, no signs of slipping, nothing like that. So it might actually be in pretty good shape. But regardless, we're going to do a full overhaul on it, and we'll see what we come up with. But for now, that is going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, if you did, please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.